Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following all the news and rumors on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Daemon Hatfield. As always, I'm joined by Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast Unlocked.
Good to see you, Damon.
You as well. And joining us from the PlayStation side of things from Podcast Beyond is Max Scoville. Welcome back to the show, Max.
Beyond and hello.
Lots to talk about this week. We've learned that The Last of Us Part 1 might not be the only fairly recent PlayStation exclusive getting the remake treatment. There might be an even more recent game getting that very special treatment. But our big story this week comes from CD Projekt Red, which decided to share a roadmap of what it's working on years and years into the future. So it's very interesting to have this sort of like an early look. No games were shown, but we have this whole slate of projects that we know are now in the works at CD Projekt, including a whole new Cyberpunk game, 3 new Witcher games in a trilogy, so Witcher 4, 5, and 6 maybe, another Witcher game that's its own standalone thing, another Witcher game that has a multiplayer component on top of a single-player campaign, so maybe something similar to what they've done with Gwent in the past. And then there's what they're calling Project Hadar, which is a totally new project, not based on any license or IP that they're working on. So like, this is a lot. It's a lot for the studio, and I think the earliest of those games is years away. Some of them are surely going to land on the next generation of consoles, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series Y. Ryan, let's start with you. What do you make of this CD Projekt? I mean, I don't think they are required to share what they're working on this early in development. What do you think is the idea behind this?
Well, yeah, you're right. I don't know if we've ever seen a game developer, especially a prominent one, share their 10-year roadmap. I mean, it's crazy. We all knew that Grand Theft Auto 6 was the game that Rockstar was going to be working on after Red Dead Redemption 2. To actually just come right out and say, here's what we're doing for the next 10 years, although that's us saying 10 years. They didn't put any timelines on it, other than to say that the first of the new trilogy in the Witcher saga is at least 3 years away, which means by default, we're looking at least 10 years of games right here.
Right.
But this is a very movie studio-like thing to do. And honestly, I like it. I think it's really to try and battle the unmovable, unwinnable battle against leaks. Leaks are just gonna happen. We're in a connected world. Any of the hundreds or thousands of people that are working on any one of these things could slip up or intentionally reveal something. So I think CD Projekt Red just wants to get out ahead, and especially, remember, they have shareholders. They have shareholders to answer to, so I think this is a way to control the message and make sure that they're delivering this news on their terms and to just keep it from leaking later, which it inevitably would.
Sure. I like the movie analogy. It is like Marvel in Hall H at Comic-Con showing us logos of things that haven't even entered production yet, that are years and years away. And Max, you were covering the Marvel panel live for us at Comic-Con on IGN this year. What do you make of all this news?
So I think movies are a very different product than games. Games are kind of a moving target. I'm sure they have a better idea than we do of what the Series Y and PlayStation 6 are like. But yeah, that's a ways off. This is very much on brand for CDPR. They had that initial CG trailer of Cyberpunk 2077 in, I think, 2013. Was that about?
That sounds about
something
right.
Like that. And I think they had the logo a few years before that. They like to announce stuff long in advance, which I think kind of did them a little bit of a disservice. I think it's good to sort of be transparent about what they're working on. It makes sense, obviously, if they're going to be communicating this to shareholders, then why not just share that with everybody else? Again, the leaks and rumors thing is key, but to sort of plan that far in ahead seems a little bit putting the cart before the horse. You maybe see how the next Witcher game does before you announce the 3 after that, or what have you. I think that they should still be a little bit on timeout. Obviously, Cyberpunk managed to find its footing, but that was a what are we calling it? New gen. That was a this gen game that still tried to come out last gen, and I think that really, clearly they think really far ahead, which is great. That's cool, but also, Cyberpunk a lot of the systems in that game felt a little bit dated to me. Like there are parts in there that feel a bit Fallout, which isn't bad by any means. Obviously, that's a good system there. But as far as sort of what open world games are like in 2020 when it first came out, it had a little bit of kind of a dated feel to it in some sense, and I worry that working on something for that long or planning stuff that far in advance means that you're not necessarily, maybe not late to the party, but like a little bit out of touch with what's going on with the rest of the things. And I don't know, again, like planning this many things at once is, it's really ambitious, and it's not exactly the kind of thing that's going to earn them the good faith of just putting out one good game and winning people's trust back.
Also, if the plan changes in maybe like Microsoft or Sony's next console, when CD Projekt's going to learn about that long before we, the general public, does, and maybe there's something about that hardware where they're like, well, maybe we should do our whole next thing in the cloud or something, and completely pivot the creative idea. So they are also setting themselves up for a potential backlash if the idea changes, the plan changes from this very detailed thing that they've laid out.
I mean, they announced there was going to be a multiplayer Cyberpunk game a while back, and we haven't heard a peep about that, and that's not part of any of these projects that we know of, unless that's what Polaris or Nova or whatever it's called is.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't even everything. They're still supposed to deliver the next-gen, current-gen version of The Witcher 3 this year, and then they have a big expansion for Cyberpunk coming next year. Traditionally, video game console generations, for decades, they lasted about 5 or 6 years. Over the past couple generations, that has extended a little bit. Now it's probably more like 7 or 8. Just given that, I wonder if we can sort of guess which one of these games would be launching on the next generation of consoles. If this new Witcher trilogy arrives in 3 years, the consoles will be 5 years old at that point. So if there's a year or two in between each of those releases, I don't know. Ryan, do you think even that that full Witcher trilogy would even land completely on just this generation of consoles and not straddle into next gen?
There's no way. Yeah, that at least that 6th Witcher game, that 3rd in this new saga, is going to be on the next generation of consoles. Now, might there also be a version for the current generation? Quite probably. Microsoft, I think, can be credited for dragging Sony along into the backwards compatibility to embrace that more. So I don't think any save files potentially, or I don't think people are going to necessarily get left behind and forced to upgrade their on the console side. For all 3 of those Witcher games in order to enjoy them all. But yeah, it's that one is likely to be on the next round of consoles, and the Project Hadar, that totally new IP that they very explicitly clarified, like this is not a game at all yet. It's still just ideas, and we haven't started proper development on it. There's probably a better than average chance that that's a next gen game as well.
Sure. Yeah. It's a lot that CD Projekt has in the works. What it tells me is that in spite of the debacle that the launch of Cyberpunk was, and in spite of the fact that they had to give a bunch of refunds, I think they still made a whole lot of money off that game. Turning our attention to PlayStation, I mentioned at the top of the show, The Last of Us Part 1 recently remade and released, and very well received, but there was some discussion as to how necessary a remake of that game even was in the first place. And now Horizon Zero Dawn, a 5-year-old game, 2017 if I'm not mistaken. There's rumors, reports out there, not confirmed, but I think from more than one source is reporting that Horizon Zero Dawn is the next PlayStation exclusive up for a remake. First of all, Max, where did you come down on the idea of whether or not The Last of Us Part 1 needed a remake or not?
I understand why they did it. I think it definitely lines up a lot better with Part 2. And if you're trying to get new people on board with the HBO show, it makes a ton of sense to have something that is brand new right there for people to jump into. And they obviously threw in a whole bunch of accessibility options, which opens up a game to a lot more people. That said, there was that was a somewhat old game. Horizon, 5 years. That also came out, that had a PS4 Pro patch, which again got like a little bit of a kick in the ass from the PS5. So I don't think it needs a remake by a long shot. Like, I don't really know what they can do there that, like, obviously they can kick it up a notch and make it look more like Forbidden West, but I'm kind of lukewarm on this whole thing.
Yeah, I guess one of the complaints, Horizon Zero Dawn is a very good game, but one of the complaints is that, it came out right before Zelda Breath of the Wild, and which felt much less restrictive in your movement and being able to climb anything, whereas Horizon Zero Dawn was very traditional and you could not. They're just things. A rock is up to Aloy's shin; she cannot walk over it. Can't get over that. But the Forbidden West, the sequel, improved on a lot of that. So I guess there is room to sort of bring Horizon Zero Dawn up to Forbidden West level, but a lot of people still just really like Zero Dawn the way it is. I don't know, Ryan. What do you make of this? Do you think this is a new strategy for PlayStation? Again, this isn't confirmed, but do you think Sony is actually it's a strategy to just remake all of its recent games, try to bring them up to the PS5 level?
It sure seems like it. I mean, it's for us as hardcore gamers and our viewers who are hardcore gamers to be even watching a show like this in the first place. I think it's certainly disappointing in the sense that Sony has deservedly built this amazing reputation with its first-party studios by letting them go nuts on original stuff. I mean, Guerrilla had been making games. It was Killzone was them, right? So now, and those games always kind of did okay, but Sony said, you're free to do whatever you want. We're not going to keep you making Killzone games forever. And we got Horizon Zero Dawn out of that, which it was just clearly the right move. And, Sony has afforded this creativity, this creative freedom to their developers, and it's resulted in this absolutely world-class portfolio of games. And so if you're going to spend effort remaking them every 5 years, I mean, for me, I think there's got to be the opposite of a statute of limitations, or I guess maybe a statute of limitations that has to expire before you can acceptably do a remake of something. And Sony clearly doesn't agree with me on that. But this, you could say, well, it's not the main Guerrilla team that's doing the remake. It probably isn't. Again, it's all unconfirmed reports. We don't know. But whoever's doing it, well, that's still development effort that could be put into making an original thing and further expanding Sony's awesome first-class.
But it's a known quantity,
Well, of course. No, I get the business side of it.
Yeah.
It just I guess my point is that Sony's the creative freedom that they afforded their developers in the second half of the PS3. Well, I guess the PS3 generation and the PS4 generation has created a ton of financial success for them, and now it seems like they're just trying to do they're just affording a little less freedom.
Well, it's hard to say what's going on sort of internally there. It's interesting that they're approaching this. This feels like approaching software. It is software, but I feel like we look at games a lot of the time as sort of, as we'd compare them to movies. But in this case, it's like, I don't know, if you go to the store and you buy Photoshop, you don't get Photoshop CS6. You get the newest, most modern version. And it seems like they're really leaning on Horizon to be a flagship IP for the PlayStation 5. You've got Forbidden West. You've got the upcoming, I forget what it's called, PlayStation VR 2 game, which is going to be a big
Call of the Mountain.
Call of the Mountain, yeah. Tears of the Kingdom, whatever it's called. But it makes sense to have the first Horizon game be up to snuff and looking the best it possibly can. Look, it's funny that we're raising eyebrows and stuff at The Last of Us Part 1 and Horizon doing this 5 years later when the first remaster of The Last of Us came a little over 1 year after the first game came out. And that was a considerable overhaul of the PS3 version, and the get out of jail card they had there was that the PS3 was extremely not backwards compatible with the PS4, or vice versa. And so it made sense to be like, we have to do this whole thing from the ground up, and also this is training Naughty Dog on how to design things for this new system. But in the case of the PS5, it's sort of like, well, I already have this game. It's in my library, I can play it, and it looks great. What are you doing?
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting to see. We'll see if this turns out to be true. We don't know what Sony has coming after God of War Ragnarok in November. I don't think something like, Spider-Man 2 or Wolverine is going to be ready for first half of 2023. So maybe this remake of Horizon Zero Dawn could be slotted in there as a stopgap somewhere. We'll see. We have the results of last episode's poll. We were talking about there was a false alarm about a white Xbox Series X spotted out there in the wild. So we asked, what's the next color variant you would want for your next-gen console? And perhaps, unsurprisingly, clear is the number one winner with almost 50% of the vote.
Clear's not a color. That's the absence of color, you fools.
That's true. It's true. I can see a clear Xbox Series X, but Max, I don't know how that would work with the PS5 and its panels. The panels would have to be clear also, I guess.
Anything you can do to make those things look less like those things, I'm all about it. I don't know. I'm in a weird spot where I love my PlayStation, but I also not wild about the color blue. I say as I'm wearing a blue shirt. I love neon green. Like I would love to get more neon green stuff, and they don't really. Sony doesn't touch that. They don't want to go anywhere near that. They're like, no, thank you.
Green's in Xbox's court. Ryan, what color would you want for your Xbox Series X?
I would probably want to go a little bolder. Maybe purple.
Atomic purple.
Little GameCube. Nod there. That monolithic tower that is the Series X could be really fun in purple.
Does Nintendo have like the trademark on their copyright on the secret recipe for that plastic? Because like,
I'm not sure.
Whatever manufacturer jumps on that, and they're like, hey, here's an atomic purple GameCube.
Did you have a purple, orange, or black GameCube, Max?
Purple was the way to go.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like the Game Boy Color where it was like the see-through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's I want that. Give us some of that.
Yeah, clear consoles need to make a comeback. A poll for you to vote on for next week. Which of the upcoming CD Projekt Red games are you most excited for? This new Witcher trilogy, the next Cyberpunk, this totally mysterious new IP Hadar? Make sure to vote at IGN.com, and we'll share the results with you next week. That's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA and SF studios to make this all possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.